letters, and we talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on...
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week we're returning to 1931 for our Hollywood Studios Year by Year series. And we're going to be talking about Universal. The films in the spotlight are A House Divided and Waterloo Bridge.
By William Wyler and James Whale.
Pair of true greats behind the camera.
And then we may overwhelm you with our cinemagoing section this week because we actually, since last recording, have seen 9 movies in the theater.
Including 6 in the past 2 days this weekend, so...
We're a little bit drunk on a lot of movies.
Cinematic riches. That will come toward the end of the program.
So last go around for Universal, we also did a Wyler film, a Western.
Yeah.
He seems to have gotten his start, or he did get his start in Westerns, but you think that these are all quickies, silent era quickies. That's how he broke in as a director.
Of course, I'm not 100% sure, but from what I understand, Universal, before Carl Laemmle Jr. took over, mostly did 2-reelers. So shorts and very few features. And then when the sun rose to take over the studio at the invitation of his father, he really wanted to change Universal's image and go for a lot more prestige and make a lot more feature films, and so they did. And we're seeing some of the result of that.
Wyler stays at Universal until 1935. Then it looks like he breaks out on his own because he starts making movies for...
Not really on his own. He signed a contract with Goldwyn and worked with him for like a decade and a half. And a couple of loan-outs.
Well, yeah, because Bette Davis keeps requesting him for one thing.
If you didn't hear our 1930 program, which is quite possible you didn't, where we talked about Hell's Heroes, Wyler was a relative of the Laemmles. The old adage, Carl Laemmle had a very large family, operative here.
I always forget it.
I mean, he came across at the invitation of his family to start making movies at Universal, and it just turned out that he's one of the greatest directors of all time.
Now, of course, Hell's Heroes was a very stylish Western, and this, if you even want to call it a Western, and this is also very stylish, A House Divided. Our movies this week are Douglas Montgomery double feature.
It turned out that way. We didn't plan it, but I'm happy to see it because he is a very underrated performer that I think needs to be talked about more.
He is in 2 astonishing movies in this era, one of which we're going to talk about, Waterloo Bridge, playing, and that one, and also in Little Man What Now, Borghese, playing part of, we're going to say it, transcendental love couple.
Yeah, definitely.
And giving 2 astonishing performances.
Also excellent as Laurie, Theodore Lawrence, as part of an aborted transcendental love couple in Little Women. Terrific in everything I've seen him in, really.
But he had a kind of a weird career. He joined the Canadian Royal Armed Forces in order to fight before America entered World War II, in order to fight the Nazis.
And he seems to have, when his plane came down in 1945, he went into some British films. I haven't seen any of those.
It doesn't seem like his movie career continued for long in Europe. He made a few movies in the 40s, of which we know nothing.
No, we know nothing.
His co-star in House Divided is one of your favorites that we've talked about a few times on the podcast.
The magnificent Helen Chandler.
Now, unfortunately, this isn't much of a role for her.
It's certainly not as completely unique a role as The Last Flight, I will grant you that.
Definitely not. This is a movie that has been getting a little bit of, if you're looking at the global cinema scene, getting a little bit of attention in recent years as more and more of these pre-codes are being rediscovered. It was much better than I was expecting.
I think it was really great. Not as great as Waterloo Bridge, obviously, but still a tremendous film.
And my take on it is that it's a horror movie, so in that sense, it fits in with Universal, although it's not like any other horror movies they did.
Domestic horror.
Well, except I think Walter Houston, he's already gunning for it in the first scene, which was amazing and reminiscent, made me start thinking about There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, definitely.
He's a full-blown, unstoppable monster by the end of the movie. Okay, I'm gonna spoil the ending right now. So, this is a good movie. See it, come back, and hear my spoiler. There's often movies where there's a victim that doesn't have the use of their legs that's dragging themselves around, but Houston becomes the monster.
Well, he's like the Terminator.
Yes, well, something like that. Something like that. No matter what you do to him, you can't stop him. He gets worse, and the terrifying Nietzschean willpower of just dragging himself around and still being capable of killing his son, dragging himself up the stairs and out into the boat, into the storm, and
the
Jesus
storm
Christ.
Finally does get him, though.
Only immersing in the destructive element is able to take him down.
Element that has given him his livelihood and made him the most powerful man in town because he owns his own fishing boat and dominates the local economy.
Now, I don't know much about Walter Houston as an actor.
You don't?
Nope.
He is one of the greats?
It's been a long time since I saw Dodsworth.
Well, that may be his best performance, but there are so many good ones.
Does he usually play a terrifying person?
Well, he can do a lot of different things. He can be very soft-spoken, but certainly in Rain, he is a maniacal preacher, you may recall. You've seen Rain.
That's true. Again, most of these are movies I've only seen once.
He did do well as a crazed preacher, so he does wind up playing that. And a stern patriarch Of Human Hearts, a Jimmy Stewart movie, he is also that kind of character, berating his son.
And of course, we saw him recently in a small role in Duel in the Sun.
There he is, a sex-crazed preacher, a free agent, not a dad of anybody. Or maybe a lot of illegitimate children.
So what do you want to say about House Divided?
We should set it up a little bit. It does start out with a remarkable sequence, detailed series of shots of rocky beach face funeral. The whole town is there, and the procession is being led by Walter Houston, the big man, who's treating it all as a test of his character, basically. Not as an opportunity for mourning, certainly. It is just all about whether he can get through all of this without cracking or showing any kind of weakness, and that's how he lives his entire life. And he's got his mopey son coming along with him. You can see just by the body language, Douglas Montgomery delivers, like we were saying with Jennifer Jones last time, and these are a lot of long shots, and Montgomery is giving a stage performance, communicating absolute abjection.
Yeah, and you can see right off the bat, as a study of toxic patriarchy, this movie is not subtle. That's why it made me start thinking of There Will Be Blood.
It really works as an antecedent of There Will Be Blood.
Douglas Montgomery is a very effete-looking young man, a very sensitive actor, but he's also, in these scenes, acting like a normal person, unlike Walter Houston.
Oh yeah, well this is what your body would look like if you were burying your mother, I would think.
So they go to this saloon.
Yeah, they wind up at this gin hall. All hell breaks loose.
So Walter Houston is adamant that the way that they're going to mourn this boy's mother and his wife is they're going to go drinking and whoring together as a bonding act, because it's the only way he understands how to bond with another man.
Bros being dudes together.
And Douglas Montgomery, to his credit, is completely not into this. He will placate him unless there's something he just absolutely doesn't want to do. He's willing to keep house for him and serve him food. He's going to choose his battles. But he's not willing to drink and whore after they've just buried his mother. Or at all, I think.
No, not at all. But you do see that Houston, he is a monster of the will, as you said.
He gives a speech about it at some point. Not actually using Nietzsche's name, because I'm sure he doesn't read, but
he does seem to, as much as he can, care about his son, and he does genuinely seem to think that this is the way that a man gets on with his life. The movie is definitely telling us this is the wrong approach. It's
telling a lot more than that.
But he's not a villain, melodrama villain at this point.
He's a monster.
He's not doing it to torture torture his son. He thinks this is good for him.
That's true.
And I think that's an important distinction.
Okay. Is that how you read There Will Be Blood?
No.
That guy gets to the point where he is torturing people.
Yeah. And Walter Houston, maybe eventually, after he becomes severely physically impaired, yes, I think he does actually become a melodrama villain and horror monster. At the beginning here, he's just a guy with bad ideas about how to live, bad patriarchally inspired ideas, and he's trying to force them on someone who knows better. That's the position the film puts you in.
So ultimately we find out Walter Houston, well, we know he's a fisherman.
Well, he's the captain of a fishing boat, right? Important person in that kind of a community.
And he owns this big old house that has been in his family for generations.
It is a cool house.
A little bit like Buster Keaton in Steamboat Bill, but not in a comedy form. He's not suited for this life. He's bad at assisting his father on the boat, and he wants to get away and farm, he says.
Yeah, all the local wharf rats make a point of noting that when Douglas Montgomery goes along, the hauls are much less impressive. So he's actively harming his dad's business out there.
But the father remains adamant that this is the way it's been done in the family for generations, and you're going to have to work with me this way. So there doesn't seem to be any out for Douglas Montgomery.
And it's kind of interesting that in a movie like this, usually it would be like the son is artistically inclined.
I know, I thought it was weird that this is the choice, that he decides to go off and become a farmer. Is this really going to be much better of a life? Well, he thinks so.
Well, his mother comes from inland and farming stock, he mentions later. So a lot of it is about a yearning for his mother.
Probably. They come home after a day of bad fishing. The housekeeper is walking out.
No housekeeper can put up with this for very long. And of course the movie and a few people make remarks here and there implying that the wife was worked to death by Walter Houston. Just
sure.
Continuously burdened with more and more tasks.
It's really odd. Like, this wife becomes this haunting figure that throughout the movie you keep wondering what she was like and what her story was, because Douglas Montgomery at one point says, and he doesn't seem like he's lying or fantasizing, he says that she liked the father. There was a life in which this couple got along with each other, each performing their tasks.
That's what we're asked to believe. And if he was just a tyrannical father torturing the mother, it wouldn't be as interesting of a movie. Walter Houston, he doesn't see himself as that kind of a villain.
But it definitely seems, from what develops in the present timeline, that it was kind of a business arrangement type of marriage. It wasn't sexually based, although it produced a child. Her role was to keep house and to serve. And his role was to bring home the fish.
Bring home the fish.
And to be served. And to go out and drink and whore, because we didn't even finish talking about that amazing first scene where he ends up, first of all, dancing with a woman. And when she tries to mention the fact that his wife is dead, he just
throws her into the wall.
Just gets rougher with her. He is quite rough with these women. After that, he gets in a fight with a guy over a sex worker.
That's right.
And from the way they argue, it definitely sounds like this has happened before. This is how he does his sexing. His sexing and his wifing, other than for the purposes of reproduction, and they've only had one, are separate spheres.
Yes, that's true. That's true. He has an established method. They can do a bunch of different events, and whoever wins gets the lady in question. The night actually ends with Douglas Montgomery just completely melting down and having a tirade.
Well, yeah, his father beats him up, doesn't he, for the first time?
That's right. He punches him out, knocks him cold, and then drags him home. That's what happens.
Right. His son is not a fighter. After this housekeeper departs, Walter Houston gets the idea that I don't have a wife and no housekeeper will stay, so I might as well just get another wife. He looks through a catalog and finds one that looks hale and hearty and beefy, and that's what he wants, someone who can do this work. Maybe the problem wasn't that she wasn't happy with the arrangement, but that she just wasn't physically strong enough. So he's going to get the right size this time.
He says, we need the right touch for this, son. You've got more of a poetic soul, so you write the letter to her. I was wondering if this was going to turn into some kind of love letters situation.
Sort of does.
Well, a little bit.
The second this happens, I'm like, okay, we're going to get Day of Wrath.
Yeah.
Which we more or less do, other than the fact that Douglas Montgomery is way better than the son in that movie.
So that's what they do. They enter into a contract long distance with this mail order bride.
However, there's a twist that provides the plot of the rest of the movie. Oh yeah, and also it's important that he makes a deal with his son that this wife can replace him, since he's been sort of filling the wifely role.
He has, yeah. He's been taking care of the home, and that won't be necessary any longer if they actually get this woman in. So Douglas Montgomery can go inland and pursue happiness wherever he chooses.
And I think Walter Houston does want human contact. I think he does want someone there as a companion.
At the end of the day, after a hard day's fishing, yeah, he wants to come home to someone.
And then, maybe go out whoring again.
I mean, he does have his dog, too, who he likes a lot.
Oh yeah, he's got what breed of dog was that? It was something big and scary looking.
Yeah, but also very loving.
Oh, he adores Walter Houston, who kind of likes roughhouse playing with him, but also will kick him and shove him, tell him to get the fuck out if he's being annoying. It's the kind of relationship Houston wants in life. If he could just have that relationship with everybody that he has with his dog. Just be totally dominating, but also sometimes have fun.
Yeah.
That's what he wants.
Indeed.
Is that too much to ask? Helen Chandler turns up unexpectedly.
So this is a big twist. Helen Chandler must weigh like 95 pounds.
Tiny and frail and blonde.
Walter Houston's not there when she shows up. He makes a point of not being there. Don't even go meet her at the station.
Get her used to fancy treatment here.
No mollycoddling of this woman. She's got a hard life in store for her. He does set her up by getting the son to write a fairly flowery letter and tell her about the view. Women like those kinds of things. That's the extent of dissembling that he's willing to do.
Bait the hook.
They could bait it even more by at least being different with her until she puts the ring on. But Houston doesn't do that. He's not that Machiavellian. So Douglas Montgomery is there to welcome her when she gets there, and she explains right away, well, my friend got married to someone that she actually knew in the town, and I wanted to get away. My life situation was terrible on the farm that I'm from.
With, I don't know what she says, 5 kids or something?
6, yeah, she's one
of
6.
All girls?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
The family wanted to be rid of her. She makes it seem like it was a terrible situation. Anything would be better, or almost anything. This is where she winds up.
Initially, Walter Houston isn't doing anything bad to her. He's just a gruff, shouty man.
We do have to set the stage a little more here.
I'm going to add that there's quite a lot of nice interplay between her and Douglas Montgomery initially.
So before Houston ever shows up, they already have quite a rapprochement, and they seem to be kind of perfect for each other already.
It's not romantic right off the bat, but they are just getting along in a nice fashion.
There's a sympathy between them. We know that the son wants to take off and get out of there, so he's got all kinds of different vectors operating on his brain, trying to make her feel at home because he wants her to stay so he can leave.
Yeah.
But he also likes her. We can see that right away.
Sure.
And that starts to become a problem because he knows what he's setting her up for. And he can see right away that she's not the kind of person that his father's gonna want.
Initially he doesn't, and gruffly tells her to pack up and go home. Like you say, he's not at this point a melodrama villain.
No, he's like, look, you can't leave tonight, so stay for dinner.
I'm not unnecessarily cruel.
No, he's not.
Honestly, she took a real big chance here.
So she sits back down with them, but then he takes a good look at her.
And she's 19 years old and cute, and I guess he thinks that she could be good for something else.
Unfortunately,
than keeping house.
His mind does start to go down that track, and he's like, well, why not?
And she's just too terrified of him to firmly tell him no, and also she isn't sure at this point whether or not it would be a better situation to stay or go home.
Because she does make it very clear it's a bad situation at home, and there's nowhere else in the world for her to go. So she just gets railroaded into marrying him.
Yeah, he just starts railroading her into, I don't know, he doesn't seem to be thinking much further ahead than the wedding night here, so. Never thought of marriage as a sexual proposition before, but now here is this young mail order bride, and why not?
Here, the son definitely becomes
alarmed,
tortured, because she asks him, should I do this? And he says, well, sure, Mom liked him, why not? And this is an egregious error on his part, which he does atone for
Yeah, but you
throughout
do-
the rest of the film.
You do understand why he's doing it. He has only just met her, and he's been thinking for years about getting out of this situation, and what's he gonna do?
Clearly doesn't think his dad is a rapist until the wedding night when he realizes that he is. In quite a few films from across the world, a wedding celebration traditionally is a time when everyone, but especially the groom, gets really, really hammered so that
when the bride pleads with him to please not have sex,
he won't even hear her. Yeah, she got like one day to think about this and really didn't want any part of it and couldn't say so.
And she's terrified of him.
So she runs up and locks herself in her bedroom, and Houston is just gonna knock the door down and go in there and get her. And at this point, finally, the son must act, and he actually does, to his credit. And he goes all the way. I mean, he gets into a slug match with this monster, comes out ahead.
Well, drunk Houston falls backwards over the stairs. Is this the first William Wyler staircase melodrama scene? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess probably it is.
And this is where we move into the next wrinkle of the plot, which is the
paralyzed tyrant.
Well, of course, this made me think of that terrible Twin Peaks plot from
Yeah, I was thinking of Leo Johnson as well.
Yeah, Leo Johnson. When is Leo Johnson going to be reactivated? Become an unstoppable monster again for Shelley and
Bobby.
Yeah. This one has the power of speech.
He never shuts up, but he can't walk.
But the doctor tells him he'll never walk again, but he wills himself to get around.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that the time he believes that the time will come when he'll be able to walk as well, so we're kind of half expecting that to happen too. But anyway, it turns out he doesn't need to walk, as I said.
He's got strong upper body, and he can pull himself around on a wheelchair, but even without a wheelchair he can get around. Just drags himself across the floor.
And up the stairs, and into the bedroom.
Sure. Months pass. We do see just incredibly done scenes where he's trying to get up and just collapses. That is not easy to make visceral. I think it would look fake, because Houston does have the use of his legs, but he really does a good job of making it look like his legs are breaking all over again when he tries to stand up.
At first, before I knew this was going to be Unstoppable Monster, I was actually thinking of Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, which I've only seen once when it came out, but maybe a few times I saw it when it came out, but not since then. Was Walter Houston not a stage actor?
I believe so, yeah.
I guess I knew he was Canadian.
From our town of Toronto.
Really? That's cool. Why do people always talk about Lorne Greene, but not about Walter Houston? It's ridiculous. Starting in 1924, he began a Broadway career. You can see that here, his skill as a physical actor.
Launching the Houston dynasty, which continues to this day. And John Huston, his son, was involved in this film. He worked on the screenplay.
Yeah, which is very good.
So it was a family affair all around at Universal.
At a certain point, well, I mean, obviously the two young leads are discovering that it's irresistible, that they're falling in love with each other, and they have to get out of this fucking situation, but they don't know how. There's only two ways for this plot to go, which is that you kill him or he kills you, basically. You can't just, hire someone to look after.
Another thing about this movie, again, that makes it have just a little bit more kick than you normally would see. Walter Houston, there's a whiplash effect because he's obviously not too impressed with his bride after what happened on the wedding night. But then she sticks around for a year with him as he convalesces. And he really does think that she stayed because she's a loyal woman and is going to be good for more than just for him to attack. And whatever feelings he's able to muster, he starts to invest in her for real.
This is what I'm saying. I think it said dialogue was by John Huston, and there's a pretty good speech here where he says all of that to her, but then ends it by saying, it's not like I can't wait to hold you in my arms, my darling. He says, I can't wait to take what's mine. Just spoils it right there, and he still perceives all people as his property.
Well, no, that's not going to change, but I'm just saying there's an extra dimension to his feeling for her that develops during this convalescence period, and that makes it even more infuriating to him that he finds out that she's actually only stayed to fall in love with his son. That just completely breaks his brain.
And so what happens here? He discovers them together the night they're going to run away, which is a storm.
Oh yeah. everything, all the elements are in play.
I think he's dragging himself up the stairs in order to see her, right? And then he finds them together in the bedroom.
He can't deal with this anymore. He's no longer human at that point.
He can pull himself so fast that I was actually really afraid for Douglas Montgomery. And it is his son he's going... Because it's really always been about him and his son being a pussy.
It's true. He doesn't actually make any serious moves to kill his wife.
He'd like to rape her, but he's not going to try to kill her.
No.
So then Douglas Montgomery has told her to, even though there's a terrible storm out, has told her to go get the boat ready.
Yeah, so...
While he deals with this. with mental dad.
Get the boat off its moorings so they can sail away to a brighter future. She's not an experienced sailor.
And nobody could survive this storm. Anyway, it's terrible.
Another person would have just not started getting the boat ready. They would have went to hide somewhere else. But she, I guess, figures...
Well, I think she figures that Houston could drag himself anywhere after them if they don't, get away in water.
Yeah, you understand the urgency of it. She figures, I'd rather take my chances with a hurricane than Walter Houston. And that really has a lot of impact. The fight in the bedroom, it's terrifying because Walter Houston seems so threatening, but it's also terrifying because it does seem like he's overmatched, right? I mean, he can't use his legs, and Douglas Montgomery doesn't want to fight with him and says, I can't fight with you like this, Dad.
It's true. He does say
He's
that. He's
terrified of killing his father, and his father doesn't even really have a fair chance.
Except that I was just afraid for Douglas Montgomery.
Okay. He's not really afraid only for himself. He's more afraid that he's going to have to kill his own father.
Well, because that's the only way to stop him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he will kill his son.
So, we don't have to go blow by blow. They do finally struggle their way out of there. Douglas Montgomery gets knocked out briefly, but manages to get away.
And I guess Walter Houston, ultimately, he ends up kind of gloating over the fact that even in his
diminished state,
not able to use his legs, he's going to be able to rescue this girl.
He takes charge of the rescue operations, gets in a boat, he's hitting people. Let's get out there.
But then they end up in a little boat together. A rowboat.
Helen Chandler is in serious danger here. The ship is going to capsize. It's going to be knocked against the rocks. It's going to be the end of the fishing empire of Walter Houston's family, unfortunately. Maybe the end of Helen Chandler. She does a good job of finding ways to cling to this boat.
Oh, terrible storm.
It does seem to have been filmed on location partly because...
Well, yeah, but you can also see that there's a model.
It's just really beautifully done. This stuff at the end here is quite expensive, I think.
Yeah, this must have been a prestige drama. There were quite a few fancy camera shots as well.
Oh, yeah.
Again, more evidence that William Wyler was thinking about how to use the camera before he met Greg Toland.
Sea set pieces at the end are masterfully orchestrated, and the hurricane sorts through the saved and the damned here.
But Houston does go out like a real demon. He seemed to be laughing and gloating at his son who's trying to swim toward the boat or something.
Yeah.
It's the last we see of him. And, Houston?
Yeah, and Douglas Montgomery has a heroic final act here. He dives into this roiling sea and actually makes it to Helen Chandler and gets her to safety. A really interesting thing to think about. My Houston family fan fiction is that John Huston, well, he did finally get around to making Moby Dick in the 50s. Sadly, Walter was dead by then, but he must have been picturing his dad as the ultimate Ahab.
This final scene does a good job of conveying that for sure.
The movie ends with our two young lovers sunning themselves on a rock the next day.
They're like, patriarchy is dead! Yay! Now we can be happy! And go farm. So Helen Chandler is from a farming family, and she says she likes the sea.
Yeah, see, I don't know how it's all going to turn out.
They have this nice big house.
Yeah, I think they're going to stay.
What are they going to do, though?
I don't know. It is a wonderful house.
The kitchen is especially nice, where they have their bonding moments. Speaking of Houston family fanfiction, I'm just looking at this Wikipedia entry. His father was named Robert Moore Houston. I'm wondering if I am related to the Houston.
That would be fun.
Clearly, that's an adoption of mother's maiden name, right?
There are a lot of Moors, though.
Shut up. Can't be that many Moors in Canada. Yeah,
I think it's
like,
pretty
it's like
common.
the Smith of Anglo-Irish names.
I think it was just a terrific film. We didn't talk that much about just sort of the feel of the scenes, but they are really...
It's a horror movie.
Carefully thought out. But the contrasts between the calm moments where Walter Houston isn't there and the moments when he is there...
Well, that's a horror movie.
Tremendous.
Yeah, so I didn't know Wyler made films like that. He did a lot of versatile things at Universal. That is for sure.
He did.
So we are now going to talk about the Great Waterloo Bridge.
Directed by James Whale. I would say James Whale's greatest film, although I know that he made many great films, including Showboat and the cavalcade of horror films for which he is best known today. But Waterloo Bridge is tough to beat.
I couldn't believe it when you showed me this, that I'd never really heard anyone talk about it. I assume it's had a Criterion release or something. Apparently it was part of a Warner Home Video release together with Babyface and Red-Headed Woman.
Yes, I have that DVD set.
TCM Archives Forbidden Hollywood Collection Volume 1. Those are two great movies, but this movie does not fit with them.
No. It's rare that studios will let Criterion make an edition of their films unless there's some special reason to do it.
Well, without a Criterion release and without named stars, although James Whale himself should be a name, but I mean, I guess that explains why it hasn't gotten that much attention. Anyhow, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
It never fails.
And it's so different than the rest of James Whale's work.
He did a lot of different stuff.
He did, but at the same time, he didn't do much stuff, so everything he did stands out. I've never seen the Olivier and Vivien Leigh version.
Robert Taylor.
Oh, well, clearly I've never seen that version.
It's good. It's directed by Mervyn LeRoy, but it's not nearly as good as this, and it has a much more moralistic tone, as you would expect from a film made under the Legion of Decency era.
Well, I've never seen it because it was never particularly highly spoken of to me. So
no, it is good.
That's why. But I don't want to see any other version of this after this at all, as much as I love Vivien Leigh.
So once again, it's Douglas Montgomery, under the name Kent Douglas, and Mae Clark.
Mae Clark. Should we blame your favorite, James Cagney, for what happened to her career and mental state?
No.
Seems like she did at moments.
I think she might have blamed the hoopla around it or something, but I do feel like she was friends with James Cagney.
Sure, I guess, but she didn't seem to like the fact that he fooled her into doing the scene with the grapefruit in the face, because she would have known that there probably would be a reaction to that was favorable to him and not to her.
Yeah, but she was in a tiny role in The Public Enemy.
It was hindsight. I just remember her in a documentary talking that way.
Oh, of course. You talked to her later on, and she was disgusted that this is what she's remembered for.
And very bitter that he tricked her.
But I don't think at the time it would have seemed like a major problem, because she was on her way to getting great roles like Waterloo Bridge. And Impatient Maiden, too, with James Whale, is also a really good film. A small little side role in Public Enemy, I'm sure she didn't think was ever going to be.
Anyway, the fact that that's what she's remembered for is disgusting after seeing this performance, which is even better than Douglas Montgomery's performance. Oh, he's billed as Kent Douglas.
Yeah.
Is he billed in all of them as Kent Douglas?
Yeah. He was an MGM contract player, and he has a small appearance in Daybreak, which is also a Helen Chandler film. That's his first movie. And MGM didn't want him to go under his own name, which is Robert Douglas Montgomery, because they already had a Robert Montgomery. That's too many Roberts. They also had Robert Young, and Elise always confuses Robert Young and Robert Montgomery anyway, so I'm sure she's happy that there's not another Robert Montgomery thrown into the early 30s mix. They made him be Kent Douglas for a year.
Same person as far as I'm concerned. Robert Cummings, I can tell him apart. They're all great though, the Roberts.
Robert Mitchum.
Every Robert is great. Robert Stack, Robert Ryan. They're all more Roberts the better.
Robert Taylor.
Yep.
In the remake of Waterloo Bridge. He becomes Douglas Montgomery starting with Little Women and going forward in Little Man, What Now?
Oh, okay.
And that's his middle name. So the play is a Robert E. Sherwood play.
I'm supposed to know that name?
Yeah, he's a Algonquin Round Table guy.
Well, you would know that.
He wrote The Petrified Forest. He was a dramatic critic as well. A great writer. He wrote Idiot's Delight. He also wrote The Best Years of Our Lives for Wyler.
Oh, okay. So presumably this play originally had... No, because I'm looking at the Wikipedia entry for the play right now, and it was always an American chorus girl. And a fellow American, so...
Doesn't look like it was a big hit, because it only ran for 3 months.
So does that mean Vivien Leigh is playing an American in...
I think they rewrote it.
They changed it. Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering what was in the original.
It's not essential.
Now it's answered. No, definitely not. Oh god, how do I describe this movie? First of all, Mae Clarke is a funny looking woman, but she is beautiful in this movie, and she is so vivacious, and so lively, and so lovable and adorable, and I don't know what to say. She's just fantastic.
Whale gives her a much more sunny role in Impatient Maiden, and it's like a proto-screwball comedy so many years before they came into vogue, and she's terrific in that as well. Very vivacious.
Even in this movie, she pretty much gets to run the entire gamut of emotion.
It's true. Although a lot of it is a facade in this one. The first couple of scenes, we get to see her at the height of her success as a chorus girl before everything goes bad.
Right, and she's just really... She is putting something on for the audience because she's actually quite bored with this.
Oh yeah, well that first scene shows her yawning when the spotlight's not on her or whatever. It's amazing. I don't think I've ever seen a scene quite like that.
Her personality as an actress is just so forceful. And I mean, that's what he's asking her to give. Most of this, it's very play-like in that it's very confined to rooms, her room.
She treats it as a jail cell, a few locations in London, and then the rambling estate of Douglas Montgomery's family.
But he really uses the play-like quality to make you feel time passing in a way that seems real.
Mm-hmm. No, sets are tremendous.
And scenes emotionally developing because of the close quarters of the actors and the real time passing. He also uses, is something that I think I took note of maybe for the first time because we've been seeing all of these Bresson films. He uses natural sound. Well, he doesn't use natural sound, but he uses...
diegetic sound.
Yeah. Well, I mean, street sounds coming through the window.
Yeah.
Expand the world, right? And contribute to the atmosphere of the scenes when they're in that apartment. Which is something they could have been doing on the stage at the time.
Yeah, of course.
This direction is just masterful.
It is.
And so confident in what he wants to do with both the filming and the performances. And I also want to note, this isn't so much about the fancy shots, like the Wyler film, as it is about moving camera. And did you notice that? The camera kind of moving around and circling around the actors at certain points in the performance?
Oh yeah. Sways with them as they take the blows that life has to offer. We get sort of a short history of the decline and fall of a chorus girl. Starts out with her living a kind of mercenary Broadway baby life. She gets out of the show, hops in a fancy car, and she got new fur wrap that she has exacted from this guy as the price of going on a date with her. Is living this kind of carefree existence, although already kind of enmeshed in the snares of patriarchy. Like the way that she can assert herself in life is by getting a sleazy guy to buy her furs.
Yeah, and again, even at the height of her, as we said, chorus girl fame, it's clear that she's kind of detached from it. This isn't maybe her ideal way of living in the world, but we later find out, compared to where she's come from, that this is great.
No, there's a pretty heart-wrenching revelation of what her origin story is, her American backstory, yeah.
This ought to be a kind of sentimental melodrama, but he just plays it so raw and naturalistic and at the same time for such pure and heightened emotion that it really transcends the material, which is pretty good. The direction and performances really transcend that. Because we're not going to do it justice by talking about the plot.
No, of course not. You have to see it. You have to experience it for yourself. We can't really ruin any of it either, because you can't quite picture how the actors, in collaboration with the director, go about drawing you into this situation.
So the war happens, and that seems to interfere with her career.
Probably does put a major damper on productions in London because they're getting bombed all the time. And there are still shows going on, but many fewer. So they only need the creme de la creme of the chorus girl crop, and she's not in that class, I guess.
So it's kind of like the setup at the beginning of Sternberg's Dishonored, in that wartime has caused a lot of women to become sex workers.
Yeah.
You know what? I vacillate. I'm trying to be an ally, and so I try to use the term sex worker in this podcast and all our versions of podcasts, but it's difficult because that term to me means that someone is either in that line of work voluntarily. Well, I mean, it always means that someone is in that line of work voluntarily, either because it is their best of available options or because they just want to do it, because they have a lot of options. It also means someone who is actively working to improve the conditions of sex workers. I don't want to use the term for all of these melodrama characters who are clearly in this life and have absolutely no desire to be doing it.
Right. There's a difference between the theory, which we wholeheartedly endorse, that there is no moral stigma that should be attached to making a living this way. She comes from a society that makes her feel that there is a moral stigma attached to it, and therefore she does feel terrible about herself for being a sex worker.
I think it makes sense to use the term sex worker for real life people who are forced to be or voluntarily in this line of work. But for movie characters, in a movie like this, I'm going to say prostitute.
Well, a movie where so much of it revolves around her self-hatred.
This is my second viewing that emerged for me as a very clear arc for her character, a strong engine or fuel for the heightened emotion that the film crescendos towards after starting, as I said, in this very sort of naturalistic tone. It occurred to me, what little we know about James Whale's life, that this sexual guilt that actually starts driving her crazy could have been something that he related to.
I think that's quite possible. Maybe not personally, but as a gay man, an openly gay man in Hollywood in the 30s, he definitely experienced quite a lot of stigma. And he would have also known a lot of people who were even more damaged by attempting to live that life during that time than he was.
It's true. I guess more than anything, it's prescient in that he was hounded out of Hollywood, apparently.
Yeah.
For being openly gay, and ultimately ended up committing suicide.
Oh yeah, well
Although not until much later.
The last 20 years of his life are horribly sad. And it does seem that...
And his characters are very doomed. I mean, think of the end of Bride of Frankenstein as well as the end of this movie. And it's her who's doomed.
Yeah.
Apocalyptically doomed.
And he has a deep sympathy for this character, clearly.
Charles Laughton, you could be torn apart feeling sexual guilt and at the same time trying your damnedest to live happily and openly. Charles Laughton did not live openly make any attempt at happily until later in his life. We're not going to spend a lot of time parsing the psychology of closeted homosexuality because we don't know anything about it.
I think what is true, and if you contrast this film with the 1940 version, that movie really does feel like Vivien Leigh is tainted morally by what she has done, objectively.
Yeah, this movie absolutely does not, but it is making her go insane. It is actually making her go insane. She feels so terrible because of what she is doing sexually.
And this movie absolutely does share Douglas Montgomery's perspective on things. There's nothing wrong with her at all, except the fact that she has begun to hate herself for doing something that she had no control over in order to get some money. Unfortunately, it also takes the view that she may be too damaged for anyone to help her, no matter how much goodwill there is and how much love there is.
She cannot, even to the very end, she cannot get this taint of guilt out of her.
And I think it's very brave to do this. I guess maybe the play ends this way too. I'm not sure. The thing is, they do have their reconciliation. He delivers the lines exactly the way you would want, and none of that can save her because they're still living in the same terrible society that deformed her self-perception all those years. Individual romance can't fix these things. These are bigger than the problems of two people. And
not to mention, what are they going to do? There is also a class problem here. It's not like she's just met any soldier who's coming from a background similar to hers or a middle-class background.
We can jump around a bit here. The scenes where they're on the country estate with the mother, who is so sweet and nice, but also
evil.
Yeah, it is evil, right? The movie knows this. Again, the 1940 version does not have the same perspective on it. It presents it as if this mother is an oracle speaking directly from God and just telling Vivian Leigh the truth about herself.
Which I guess shows you what different things can be done with the same material.
Oh yeah, it's a very interesting double feature.
So this mother, well, do we want to go back to the beginning and work up to the mother?
Yeah.
They meet by chance on Waterloo Bridge. Things start out pretty lighthearted.
It's a meet cute.
Considering this woman has been forced into prostitution. As long as things don't get serious emotionally, she seems to be able to, get through this with some bravado.
Yeah, well, she's just playing her usual role. Presents a bright face to some soldier who is transiently ambling through London, and they have a good night, and he gives her some money, and that's what she does. And
then she looks away and yawns.
It's a pretty detailed meet cute. There's an old lady she just says, I don't hold with air raids. She drops her potatoes on the bridge.
The apple seller Cockney type.
Yes.
And
I don't hold with raids.
But this is all so lovely and just absolutely natural. Again, the way the scene is played with May Clark just laughing and helping her out and just throwing her hands up and saying, oh, well, what are the chances I'm actually going to get killed in an air raid? I guess I'll help this crazy old lady. Why not? I can't just leave her here to be killed. So it's also very sweet and fatalistic at the same time.
And Whale is an ace comedy director as well, and he gets
That's true.
a lot of laughs out of this material at the beginning.
And so then Douglas Montgomery joins the fray.
He's been in the war for a couple of years now, so he's not quite as naive as he once was, but he's still pretty naive when it comes to social interactions. Maybe he understands the charnel house of war.
He's incredibly naive about women, this is established.
Yeah, he's very eager to go along with these two women.
So the plot and the way it's directed has us believing is that he has never been in proximity with any attractive young woman for this long. Intimate proximity. I guess he's, met girls at debutante balls or whatever, but just kind of relating to each other in an intimate adult way.
And his backstory, like the actor's later story, is that he is an American who wound up living in Canada with his mother, and she got married to a British doctor, and war is declared, and he just wants to get in it. So he joins the Canadian Army.
And there's some wonderful terse dialogue where she's, well, did it live up to your expectations? Did you have fun? And he's, no.
Yeah.
That's all he has to say.
Again, he is jaded about war. He's no longer impressed by heroics and patriotism and any of that guff.
But he's here and he's going to do his best.
Yeah, well, what else are you going to do at that point? You'll be killed if you try to leave.
So they end up going back to May Clark's place, and she thinks she doesn't know what she's got on her hands here yet, and she thinks she's just going to spend the night with him, like usual.
Yeah, and soldiers always have lots of pay in their pockets because there's nothing to spend it on at the front.
We meet her landlady before all this gets started, who he keeps calling sweet.
Yeah, so he thinks she's a landlady from a normal Hollywood movie who's always kind of maybe a little gruff but heart of gold. But no, she is a terrible human being.
She's a Dostoevsky landlady.
Yeah.
Not quite, but
no, she's pretty bad.
On the spectrum.
Ultimately, she proves herself to be utterly disgusting.
And he does realize that.
Yeah.
That's true.
She is constantly hovering around waiting for her money, and I guess that's what landlords do.
And she knows that this girl is forced into prostitution, so she's just waiting. So when she sees Douglas Montgomery arrive,
then she stops bothering them because she's like, well, I have to let this transaction go through so I can reap some benefits here.
Exactly. So they just have this very long, lovely play scene together.
He goes to get fish and chips. It's very cozy and great.
But it ultimately, that scene already ignites into hysteria. Oh, she gets the money out of him, and then she already starts going crazy at that point, at that moment, because she's feeling a connection with him.
She is, and she realizes that everything he's saying is 100% genuine. He is not putting on any kind of a smoothie act for her.
Yeah, she realizes that he's going to give her the money for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's what breaks her.
She's like, you fucking smug, noble Boy Scout, you're gonna do this for me? Fuck you.
But this is her split personality.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the first time it's come out, but it comes out, it's provoked by this situation where she just is feeling so terrible about what she is doing and what she has done that she starts reacting against him, taking out on him.
The closest relative of this character I can think of is Laura Palmer from Fire Walk with Me. Like, you know, the way she is with James, right?
Yes.
Like, this back and forth, like, you know, you're trying to save me, fuck you. I mean...
You don't expect this kind of insight into what sexual guilt and sexual trauma can do to a person's identity in a movie this old.
Really think Waterloo Bridge, and then you have to wait until Fire Walk with Me to get this again. You certainly don't get it from the 1940s.
Very differently, very, very differently, but, you know, sexual guilt as a split personality. You and I have also talked about Mamoulian's pre-code Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in those terms, although, again, that's a very different kind of reasons for and manifestation of sexual guilt, but she does start having a split personality in that way.
Her analysis is correct as far as it goes, right? He is feeling really good about himself for being able to give her $5, and he may never see her again, and he hasn't made any kind of demands upon her. I mean, he's not thinking about it as, I really, you know, I might have made demands, but he is still feeling a bit heroic about all of this.
Well, she underestimates the extent of his goodness, really. I don't know how else I can put this. This character is wonderful. He's a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And to Douglas Montgomery's credit, you completely believe it in the way that he plays this. He is so pure.
No, he really is. And he actually has the good grace, once she asks him to come back, he realizes, you know, everything you said is true. I guess I deserve that.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's try to forge ahead on a new basis here. We'll try to talk a little bit more openly about what's going on, although she doesn't tell him that she's a prostitute. She does tell him that she's living in very reduced circumstances and she just sort of leaves it as an ellipsis, like exactly what's going on, how she's getting any money at all.
But it's when she chews him out that she talks about her parents both being drunks who wanted to get rid of her and who, I don't know, did she say they beat her or?
Yeah, she said
Yeah, she does say that.
She didn't know if she was going to be killed any night because one or the other of them might just drink so much that they became homicidal. But does that all happen in the first conversation?
I feel like it is a long scene.
You know what? I think it happens the next day.
Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's 11 o'clock and she has to go out and get the money that she needs to give to the landlord since she has nobly refused to take his money. Some of it happens the first night and a lot of it happens the next day when he comes back.
Right.
We'll just leave it at that.
Does he get her flowers?
He shows up with flowers. She's not there. She's still out. But her next door neighbor, they talk over their troubles a lot and they, I guess, have meetings, maybe breakfast together quite a lot of mornings. So she comes over across the roof.
This woman she's not a protagonist and therefore she does not have this
inner life.
This transcendental quality. She's just a completely pragmatic prostitute.
She's not a bad person.
No.
She does care about Myra quite a lot, I think.
She's trying to secure a marriage proposal for her, actually.
Yeah, so she doesn't blow Myra's cover or anything. She just says, you know, she's so lonely over here. Things are so tough. I think if the right man came along, everything could change for her. A nice, sweet young man.
So basically she's willing to be mercenary and, well, she actually tells a comic story. She's another comic cockney.
Yeah.
She tells a story to Myra afterwards. She knows a girl who has 3 husbands in the army and she's getting all of their pays.
Fantastic.
And as long as they never have a leave altogether, she'll be fine.
Yeah, that's great.
And so she thinks one pay, that'll be good, you're set up. And of course, eventually he may find out that you're a prostitute, but it's too late for him.
Right.
And this is then from May Clark's reaction to her, we know that already this terrible guilt that's consuming her because she really is a highly moral person. She can't possibly do it to him, like in The Miracle of Morgan's Creek. She just can't do it to him. It goes against her principles. And she feels for him already, right?
Sure, she has no problem playing the game of picking up Johns and putting on an act for them.
To marry a guy she actually loves in order to get money from him under false pretenses, that she can't do.
No. Seems reasonable to me. So she is torn up by all of this, and he just keeps making it harder because he's fairly persistent and he wants to do things with her. She finally agrees to go on a trip to the country in a car with him.
Yeah.
He basically kidnaps her to his family's home. He doesn't tell her that's where they're going.
Well, he has already...
He invited her and she said, no, I don't want to do that. So he just does it anyway.
And he's already, he's already been to visit the family, and he's already talked about her to his mother, I believe.
That's right, because he was immediately going on from London to the family estate.
So this is all a little bit confusing, because he's American, but he joined the Canadian forces. Well, he joined the British forces, but he was in Canada. Now his family is in England.
Well, his stepfather is this old British guy, army doctor.
He has some dementia going on here. This is in the news a lot lately, dementia, or at least it's on Twitter a lot among people talking about the Democratic primary.
It goes in and out. He doesn't hear very well for sure, and he also tells the same stories about old Plumstead constantly.
Yeah.
So this is a guy that is very important to him from his youth, or I guess early adulthood.
You gotta wonder about this marriage, this much younger wife who's just cheerfully humoring him the whole time. I mean, obviously he's very wealthy. So.
Yeah.
And Betty Davis is the daughter who is very friendly, wears horsey clothes, and has about 5 lines of dialogue.
This is never going to go down in history as a classic Betty Davis role, but she's a great presence in it. I really enjoy her. She's
dry run for the horsey clothes in Dark Victory.
Yeah, and she's quite funny interacting with her dad, where she tries to get him on track whenever he just veers off into old Plumstead territory.
It can't be stated how funny the scenes with this man are. And that's another thing about this movie, how these comic scenes, as you were saying, do leave in the terrible tragedy.
I can't think of anything else like the experience of watching this movie.
So the first peak of extraordinary emotional intensity occurs here with the scene between the mother and Myra.
Yeah, so the mother takes her aside at night. They have a conversation. Mother has discerned that there's more to the Myra story than Roy knows. Myra does not try to conceal it. She agrees under extreme passive-aggressive moral pressure that seems like angelic movie motherhood that she will not ensnare Roy.
Well, no, what this mother does, and this mother is very gentle and genteel. Obviously someone who, just by the fact that she seems like a perfect woman, intimidates May Clark. This is the kind of woman standing in for society whose approval that she craves and believes she can never get, basically. So what this woman does to manipulate her, although she's not even doing it to manipulate her, but that is the effect of it.
No, I think she is doing it to manipulate her, but
it's also actually what she thinks and feels. Anyway, what she does to manipulate her is tells her that she is a wonderful person, and because she is such a naturally wonderful person, that is why she will give up the son.
You can't foist your corrupt life onto Roy.
And I know that you won't, because you were so good. And that is what May Clark wants more than anything, for this woman to tell her that she's so good. And that is the reason that she will be willing to make this sacrifice. Now, this could be played as this woman is a melodrama villain, and she's not. It's like a system of evil is working through her.
Exactly. I don't think that...
Because Whale actually, after they have this scene together, he actually lingers to show this woman shedding a few tears, because she really does love May Clark and admire her. She just doesn't see this as a human possibility.
No, that is, again, among the most magnificent things about the film, is that everyone, just about everyone, except for the landlady, is acting out of the best possible instincts.
And maybe the Johns.
Well, yeah.
Because we do get one scene with a John who's really given something to chew on.
They're pretty minor, but all the major characters are really doing the best they can to be really good people. And it still winds up a hell.
It's a real delicate balance of showing that this woman is evil without making her a melodrama villain, and also showing how sad she is without making her a moral hero. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't go so far as to call her evil, but she is a tool of evil.
She does evil.
She is doing the devil's work here.
And she has to do it because her husband is completely out of it.
Oh yeah, he doesn't notice anything. I mean, he's just impressed by anyone who could go on the stage. Some people can and some people can't, as I used to tell old Plumstead.
Yeah, he tells that story twice.
Yeah. Oh, maybe more than twice.
No, it's Plumstead who tells him everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Everything he knows.
As old Plumstead used to say. It's six-dimensional chess, but again, it's kind of the universe playing six-dimensional chess with May Clark, using Doris Lloyd, Kitty, the mother, to do so.
And so then the die is cast there, and so she has agreed that she isn't going to marry him.
She runs away.
Oh, that's true. She does run away. But he runs after her, back to her room. This is, I think, where we get, right after she runs away is where we get the scene with the John, where she's completely losing her mind.
Yeah.
And she is doing her usual game, or her usual act of just, being the prostitute, picking up the John, and business as usual. And then once he agrees to it, she freaks out on him.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, fuck.
Oh, she's crazy.
I'll get another one.
Yep. Goodbye. But then again, once he drives away, she goes running after him, apologizing because...
Well, this is her job.
She needs the money.
Yeah.
She needs to eat. So you already know this character can't survive this way.
No, she's too broken now. Whatever system she had cobbled together to make it as a sex worker, it's all crumbled. Nobody's gonna help her.
I guess, in a way, Showboat with
Julie Laverne,
the mixed race heroine, is another kind of exploration of sweet and wonderful person who has completely involuntarily internalized these terrible social strictures.
Yeah. No, Showboat is an incredible film as well.
You have to say Whale knows about this. Somehow, whatever bravado he put on in his life, he knows about this.
I don't see how you could be a gay man or woman in 1931 and not feel overwhelming pressure to hate yourself. Every message you would have received from the time you were born would be directing you that way. Now, whether you were able to rise above that and still have a healthy sex life would not invalidate all of these directives that you were receiving.
So they get their final scene together, where ultimately, I can't remember exactly how it goes. These scenes are very simple, but very complex. There's only a few of them, but they're very complex, and so it's all jumbled up in my mind when everything happens.
Yeah.
At some point, he extracts an agreement for her to marry him. Oh,
but then she escapes again. She runs
again.
away.
Yeah.
She writes him a little letter saying that she can't do it.
And that's where the landlady lets him know what's up.
And the landlady does serve a completely diabolical role here. Again, she's not maybe meaning to be quite as diabolical as she is, but her
role in life?
Yeah, just her complete
it's not good.
Lack of sympathy with anyone, which is what landlords are mostly like, makes her deliver the news like a sledgehammer.
Well, she's also not expecting that true love has flourished in this room.
No, she doesn't believe that could possibly happen. She doesn't see any of the fine qualities of May Clark. She only just sees her as another sex worker boarder.
Yeah.
Douglas Montgomery does not have any problem with this. His mind snaps back through all of the events of the film and he starts to see everything even more clearly through May Clark's eyes.
And he starts sobbing.
Yeah. And he says, "Shut your filthy mouth." I mean, it's an incredible delivery.
Something like filthy disgusting.
So he lashes out at the landlady, but really he could be lashing out at the universe here.
And then we get another glimpse of the universe in the form of when he finds her on the bridge, his unit, which is
shipping out,
also finds them. And there's this whole truckload. The way they're discovered talking and arguing, they understand that he is desperately trying to get this prostitute to accept his proposal. And they're laughing and jeering at them the entire time.
Yeah, it's so horrible.
The men in the truck.
Yeah, those guys.
And the captain is just pulling him away and being like, "Okay, yeah, she'll marry you. Don't get so hot and bothered. You'll be back. Come on. We gotta ship out now. Gotta get going."
But no, she gets blown up. And that's very
Which
terrible,
is the ending
abrupt.
ending of Bride of Frankenstein.
Well, yeah, that's true.
We belong dead.
Despite this incredible reconciliation that does tug at the heartstrings, it's not enough to change the way the world works. And the film rightly drops a bomb on all of our expectations right there.
It's very bleak.
A stunning achievement by Universal in 1931. Let's move on to This Week in Cinemagoing, Elise.
So as we already mentioned, we saw 3 Bresson, or more than 3? How many was there?
I think 4.
Right, because I forgot about Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne.
How can you forget them?
What's my favorite? Ladies. We saw Ladies, and then we saw Oh HASARD BALTHAZAR, we saw Mouchette, and we saw
Pickpocket.
Pickpocket. And then, on the weekend, we ran all over the city, seeing Chronicle of the Years of Fire, Serpico, You Can't Take It With You, OLIVIA, and Zalma. The odd one out here is OLIVIA, which we saw at the Paradise. The rest we saw at the TIFF Lightbox.
Very busy, very gratifying way to spend one's time.
So how are we going to take this? So first, we're going to talk about a la carte movies that we saw, and pick a couple to talk about in some detail, and then we will talk about the Bressons.
And you've been doing a little research, so you can actually provide some context here.
Well, the ones we're not going to talk about are Lucrecia Martel's Zalma, a 2017 Argentine film. It has been discussed ecstatically in all sorts of prestigious film critical venues, of which we are not one, and we are not going to discuss. We do not endorse.
It was part of TIFF's Best of the Decade retrospective, which I have been quite unimpressed with.
Well, we haven't seen much of the Best of the Decade. I just chose a few that I'd either heard about or that looked good to me. And yeah, it hasn't been going so well. I think our favorite has been Film Socialisme, Godard's Film Socialisme.
But we already knew we liked Godard.
Well, late Godard, I particularly like, which is weird. But I have no argument to support liking that film either. So, we also saw Chronicle of the Years of Fire, one of the translations.
By Mohammed Lakhdar-Hamina.
Which was about the Algerian Revolution War.
Yeah, they call it the Algerian War, but most of the film is about the long prelude to the Algerian War, the colonial period and World War II period where the resentment is gathering, the smoldering years.
Yeah, and the title that we saw on the screen was actually translated Chronicle of the Smoldering Years.
Yeah.
And this was part of the Film Foundation Restoration series again. Lakhdar-Hamina, he was himself basically sent to film school by the Algerian National Liberation Front in Prague after he joined the guerrilla forces. And he started out by making documentaries for them and eventually filmed this fictional account.
I found it quite absorbing.
It was, although mainly because I didn't know anything. I mean, obviously I've seen the Battle of Algiers. Mostly everyone has seen that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But not that I recall it in any great detail. Didn't know anything very specific about this conflict or this particular instance of colonialism.
North African. So France controlling North Africa for a lot of the late 19th and early 20th century, obviously exploiting the hell out of it, as imperialists do.
I did find it interesting how, over its 3-hour running time, it is almost relentlessly hopeless.
Yeah, well, the odds were not in these people's favor.
No. And eventually when they do win, it takes place off screen.
Yeah.
When they win their independence. And we are left to contemplate the martyrs. So spoilers, it's a bit of a downer, 3 hours, but very interesting.
And I really liked the central protagonist as much as there is one.
Well, you know what's especially interesting watching these after the Bressons, which a couple of those are studies in human misery. The protagonist himself, and I don't know if this is a fault of the film or a feature, despite the terrible, terrible things that are constantly happening to him, it never feels like a sort of personalized reflection on the horrors of human existence. It's really just a political film, you know? It doesn't seem to be universalizing this as like a necessary part of the human condition. No. Right? Because he himself is, like, every time some miserable thing happens, like his entire family dies, or almost all of it, the next time you see him, he's a horseshoe smith, and he's like super cheerful that he turns out to be good at this job, right? You know what I mean? He never seems to become increasingly despairing or downtrodden.
No, he's an extremely extremely resilient guy and
Very adaptable.
A good dad.
Yep.
He really cares about his kids. That scene where he is about to flip out because the toddler has drained all their water out of the flask and then realizes what he's doing and kisses him. That was quite impactful, I found. Really in danger here. They have almost no water. There's a massive drought. Kid has thoughtlessly destroyed.
Or even mischievously.
Yeah.
And of course, we're in an entirely patriarchal family situation. Which way this goes is dependent upon the goodwill of the patriarch, and luckily he does have goodwill.
He does. Great, affectionate little scenes with him and his various sons. Some of them seem to be played by the same actor, right? But it's different sons at different times. The one that is taking care of the sheep at the beginning, he's dead by the end, but I think that it's the same kid playing.
Well, he certainly looks like it in any case, but we did not look it up.
No, I didn't.
Let's get on to the two that we want to talk about in more detail.
Let's do Olivia.
So tell us about this choice, Dave, because you've been insisting that we see something by this director as soon as anything was screening in the city.
Well, I just started to hear about her only last year. Jacqueline Audry, the first female filmmaker in France. There may have been some others, although nobody ever talks about anyone before her. She started making movies in the late 40s.
She was what, an assistant to Opals or something like that?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe I should look that up. So she worked as an assistant to various directors, including Opals and Pabst.
So she had quite an apprenticeship, and then I guess when she was around 40, she started making films of her own, and she did make like a dozen films as far as I recall. This was the first one we saw. Olivia, if it's at all typical, it's got big stars and great production. So this is not like a fringe thing she's doing. She immediately gets into the swing of things. Huis Clos, is that an adaptation of the No Exit?
Sartre's.
Yeah. So yeah, she directed a version of Sartre's No Exit in 1954.
She also adapted a lot of Colette novels.
Yeah, she did the first Gigi.
Interestingly, some interesting facts about this director. She frequently collaborated with her sister Colette Audry, who was a member of the anti-Stalinist left and an associate of Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah, so these are...
So there's the Sartre connection for you.
Really plugged in artists and intellectuals here. And I mean, this film, I loved it.
Other than the fact, we're going to do some more background before we talk about the film, though, because I have been doing a little bit of online research, as usual. One possibility for why she has been ignored, besides the fact that she's a woman, is the fact that her style was out of tune with the new wave, which would be fetishized by critics.
I guess very few people living today are as in love with 30s and 40s French cinema as I am, so I guess it makes sense. But I went in with such high hopes, and all were realized.
The novel Olivia, on which this was based, has a pretty interesting background to it. It was a semi-autobiographical novel by Dorothy Bussey, and the Miss Julie, played by...
Edwige Feuillère.
Yeah, who you noticed in, an Opals film or a couple?
2 Opals films. She is magnificent. She's in Sans Lendemain and also a Sarajevo film.
So her character, Miss Julie, was based on Marie Souvestre, who founded the girls' boarding schools Les Ruches, or the Beehives, which I guess is the one that we see in the film, where among her other pupils was the writer Natalie Clifford Barney, who became a famous/notorious lesbian writer and bohemian who hung around in the same circles as Colette. So everybody is knowing each other here. There's Beauvoir, there's Sartre, there's Colette, there's lesbian bohemian writer circles.
And it says Dorothy Bussey was the sister of Lytton Strachey. That's amazing.
Yeah. After Marie Souvestre broke up with her girlfriend, with whom she co-founded the first school, although it doesn't seem to have been quite as big a drama as occurs in this film, she founded Allenswood Boarding Academy, outside of London, where her most famous pupil was Eleanor Roosevelt. Hey, I wonder about those lesbian rumors about Eleanor Roosevelt.
I don't think they're rumors. I think they're pretty
well established, are they?
Yeah.
So they just had a sort of intellectual business partnership?
Well, they did have some children.
All right.
DR was paralyzed after 1920.
That's true. That doesn't necessarily make you a lesbian.
No, of course not. No, I think she already was. much more interested
I don't know
in
anything
women.
about the queer relationships of Eleanor Roosevelt. I've only heard that there were these stories.
She should have been the first female president.
So yes, let's actually talk about the film, having established that a great deal of it is true.
It's a roman à clé. It's an ensemble cast, and I don't really know any of the actresses who play the younger members of the cast, all the girls at the boarding school, although, Olivia was an impressive performance as well. I don't know that actress. But the well-known actresses in the cast are Edwige Feuillère as Madame Julie and Simone Simon as Madame Cara. The analogues of the women that Elise was speaking about, they founded this school together, and there's some kind of dark secret that haunts the school. Olivia is our figure coming from the outside, hearing about all of this before she even gets there.
The actress is named Marie-Claire Olivia.
Right.
And she has no Wikipedia page. The film felt very gothic.
Yeah.
Very
Jamesian.
Very Jamesian, very decadent.
Intellectual vampires.
They are vampires. These women are vampires. And I guess that maybe what was going on sexually might have been slightly more defined in the novel. However, the fact that it is not at all defined makes it even creepier.
It is. It's so good. So disturbing.
Young Olivia, and there's quite a tradition, including early Colette novels, of girls' boarding school, the French literary tradition.
None of the girls are interested in each other.
Well, you do kind of...
They're all obsessed with...
You do kind of see that in the background every now and then, and the two girls who are most in love with Miss Julie, including Olivia, seem to be forming some kind of crush-like bond with each other too. But yeah, the main focus is on the older women, which, of course, is creepy.
Very creepy.
Creepy as hell, because these women are, in a manner, reciprocating, but in a manner that almost makes things worse than if they were simply sleeping with the girls.
Yeah. I think the person you're talking about, aside from Olivia, well, there's the student, the mathematician, who comes back and leaves again because she realizes she's causing too many problems. And there's also the Italian teacher. So she's not actually a pupil. She's, I guess, like 20 or something. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Which one?
The one who loves more than anybody else the way Madame Julie reads.
No, but
she is the Italian teacher.
Sure, the one I was thinking about, though, was the mathematics genius.
Okay.
Who briefly returns.
And then leaves again because
she's causing too much drama.
Whoa, I gotta get out of here.
So what appears, eventually what one pieces together, is that Miss Julie and Miss Cara are lovers of a sort, or in a love relationship. Who knows how much any of this is physical, but let's call them lovers.
Yeah.
They are in love, or were in love, but Miss Julie seems to be some kind of nymphomaniac who incorrigibly attempts to seduce, falls in love with, and attempts to seduce all of her pupils in a kind of almost pedagogical way, because she takes an intellectual interest in them that becomes romantic.
Yeah, it's a very ancient Greek.
But you don't see that often. It's not a familiar trope for lesbianism. And this has caused Miss Cara to have a total breakdown. But her jealousy expresses itself not as jealousy of her lover, but as jealousy of the attention and affection she's getting from the pupils. And she keeps freaking out about the fact that she herself can't get their love. So they do seem to be vampires who are feeding off of the love and attention of these young girls.
Oh, absolutely.
But one is a more successful vampire.
Well, Simone just keeps making it worse. She just gets more and more unappealing as she throws more and more fits, and it's like a vicious circle.
And yet they don't seem to be able to get out of it. We don't ever see Miss Julie as... It almost makes her more horrible that you don't ever see her taking conscious pleasure in any of this.
Pleasure in defeating?
Yes.
No, I don't think she does. That is like an unintended side effect. I don't feel like she's actually competing with Cara, but she just cannot help weaving her spell and trying to trap all of these impressionable young women and attract their awe. And she is succeeding like almost 100%.
It's not clear why she doesn't act on it. Like what the in-story reason is for her not consummating.
Well, because they're children.
You really think that's a reason? You really think she has that scruple?
Yeah, I do think that. Because she keeps saying...
So she really is, we would now call it a pedophile?
An ephemophile, yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, they're like, what, 15, 16-year-old girls, supposedly? That's
Yeah, she doesn't appear to be interested in the 10-year-olds who live upstairs.
No, so she's an ephemophile who is fighting herself every day. She's Woody Allen.
And the girls don't want her to resist.
No.
They are especially Olivia, above all, because the others seem to have sublimated their affection for her, but Olivia is on fire, man.
She really is, and that's why she gets to be the title character. Pièce de résistance, the signature scene, is obviously the Christmas party, where everything goes a bit... I guess Miss Judy is a little drunk, she seems to be.
Oh yeah, the Dorothy Arzner-style Christmas party where...
It's so beautiful.
As you actually would at these same-sex boarding schools, everybody dresses up as other genders.
Yeah, and just the way...
And dances with each other.
The set, it's incredible. It just looks so... It does look like Midsummer Night's Dream or something.
But it's also sick.
It is. This is where Miss Judy just completely loses it, and this is the most sexual things get. She grabs Cecile and kisses her on the neck.
Yeah, her bare neck.
Vampire illusions abound. But that's all that happens. And then she goes over to Olivia because she is worked up by this other encounter and says she's going to come bring her des bonbons that night. But she doesn't, because presumably she realizes, oh, I got carried away, I had one too many. And which
almost seems like deliberately torturing the girl, too. I don't know, like she could be doing that. She could be toying with her as well.
I don't think so, because she's so remorseful the next day. I do feel like Edwige Feuillée is doing incredible work in this movie to both present herself as this evil temptress and this tortured woman who is surrounded with all of these people that she has
hurt
she knows she
and destroyed.
Yeah, she's enriching their lives and really doing damage to them, and also she is miserable. And she has, by the end, she has driven her favorite person, or the person she loves the most, to suicide, probably.
Certainly there's a faint odor of sensationalistic homophobia about the whole thing, despite the fact that it's being written by someone who was bisexual. But at the same time, I mean, it's just such a fascinating cauldron of believable human sexual emotions.
It's hard to disentangle now, what is freaking out the viewer because it is adult women seducing children, and what is freaking the viewer out because the movie wants you to be like, oh my god, these women are interested in women. You can't really tell anymore. Obviously, we don't feel that way about same-sex relationships between adults anymore, but there aren't many adults in this movie. So.
But as you say, I mean, the most interesting thing about it is that it shows this continuity of Bildung.
Yeah.
Like character development and cultural development and erotic development all at the same time, and in
awakening the mind and the senses.
A sentimental education. Sometimes that was portrayed with a younger man and an older woman, not this young, but not usually this young. But I mean, there have been novels of that type too. French novels, for that matter.
Yeah,
but
sure.
This is a big thing in France. I mean, I'm thinking of Flaubert, A Sentimental Education. I'm also thinking of Cocteau's. It's not something that has been portrayed otherwise in film. Although, like I say, it's a very rich literary, particularly French literary tradition.
It's a very tense film. Almost all of it is going on just outside of the viewer's reach. Yeah, it had me on tenterhooks. I was wondering who was going to go insane, who was going to kill themselves, who was going to get any fulfillment out of any of this. And turns out not many people.
But the main character at the end does seem to feel that this was an episode in her life that she looks back on as being very important.
The thing is, it has that Gothic atmosphere, but it also looks like a really fun place where you would learn good things. The classrooms are small and well appointed. There's so many great books, and Edwidge Feuillère does do beautiful readings of Racine.
And I don't think we've mentioned the fact that, importantly for the viewer getting implicated in Olivia's journey, the two headmistresses are absolutely gorgeous.
Of course, they're two of the great actresses of the era.
So it's this world of learning that is also a world of sensual pleasure.
Incredibly funny stuff in it, too. I really like Victoire, who is the sort of no-nonsense cook at the establishment, and Gadfly, who observes the curious, deteriorating situation.
And her little tete-a-tetes with
the math teacher.
Where we hear all of this gossip. The math teacher who hates math, rightly so.
Yeah, and loves food.
This is not a world in which math reigns. Definitely literature and the emotions are reigning in this world.
Ça sert à quoi les chiffres? On peut pas les manger. Can't eat numbers. That's what she says at one point, right?
You know what else you can't do? You can't take it with you.
Yes. Frank Capra's You Can't Take It With You. Very rare, I find, to see any Capra films except for It's a Wonderful Life, even in the great city of Toronto where movies are being screened all the time.
Why on earth is that?
I really don't know. Maybe there's something difficult about getting 30s Columbia films, but we are going to see another one as part of the Jimmy Stewart festival that's going on because Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is coming in a couple of weeks.
While you were at trivia tonight, I was reading up on Robert Riskin.
Yep. One of Capra's main screenwriters.
Because I was also reading up on the plot of the play, which I haven't read. A lot of differences.
Oh, yeah.
The ones you would expect. Basically, any scene that takes place outside of the home is invented. And also a lot of things that take place in the home, are additions to the play. The play, which was a Pulitzer Prize winner, and this film, only a couple of years later, was an Oscar winner.
Yep.
One of several. Capra was on a roll.
He had a great decade in the 30s.
So Riskin, it appears... Because one of the things I was interested in were the political differences or similarities between the play and the film. And of course, Riskin was a New Deal Democrat and Capra was not.
It is important to remember that Republicans and Democrats were not the same back then as they are now. You could be a liberal Republican, and I do think that Capra was, to some extent, a liberal Republican. Opposition to the Democratic Party often had more to do with opposition to machine politics, because the Democrats did control a lot of pretty corrupt machines in urban environments across the North.
What on earth does that mean, machines?
Well, getting people to vote 10 times, dead people to vote, patronage networks, so everyone gets a job on the police force, etc., that kind of thing.
Now they just control all of the major media in the United States, and so they don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, but it is true that Capra's personal philosophy, this film shows Capra really at his weakest. I think it may be his worst movie.
Just completely all over the place, dramatically as well as in its ideas.
I mean, I love it anyway, because...
there are great things in it.
I love Frank Capra. He was my favorite director when I was a kid. I saw all of his movies as many times as I could. I had most of them taped off TV, so that was a lot. And this one, Capra is a utopian. He does not have any theory of political economy whatsoever, and this is the most glaring example of that because it just cannot escape it. Like, it shows his weakness rather than hiding it, as most of his other films do.
But people absolutely loved, obviously the establishment in Hollywood really loved him during the Depression. Because of this political incoherence, I guess, because he certainly was paying attention to the downtrodden. You get this scene in the jail, this democratic scene in the jail here.
Yeah, Capra had infinite compassion. He did not like the New Deal. He did not like the idea of becoming a slave to the government. But what he wanted was something more like mutual aid. A lot of these things that sound good in principle, but just don't work, and you need something more...
What do you mean by mutual aid exactly?
Well, like the Bailey Building and Loan.
But what does that mean in practice? He was an anarchist?
Close to it, right?
Yeah.
Because he's not interested in the government redistributing income, but he does want people to share in a different way.
Because co-ops usually go together with socialism. That's what's so incomprehensible about Capra.
Well, it's not incomprehensible at the time, because there were many liberal Republicans that felt that way. We're really honestly devoted to the idea that churches could help people out of poverty in a safer way than a corrupt democratic government.
Well, churches aren't the same thing as a co-op.
Yeah, but it's all on the same spectrum. It is civil society.
Certainly in Western Canada, co-ops were aligned with socialist thought.
Capra does take a lot of his cues from Bailey Building and Loan. It's called the Bailey Building and Loan, but it is more reminiscent of the kind of ethnic building and loans that you would get in Italian neighborhoods and other immigrant neighborhoods of the early 20th century, where people who knew that they weren't going to get anything from the government and were being shut out from a lot of avenues of success in mainstream American society would pool their resources and work together to bring the whole community up. And I think Capra was stuck in that mindset. This is why you get all these people with their networks of friends saving them by donating money in a lot of his movies. And he really believes in this stuff, so it still has an impact, even though you know it's a terrible political theory.
Oh yeah, but not only that, but you have to listen to this nonsense in which Lionel Barrymore is making speeches to the millionaire. We're not at billionaire time yet here. Making speeches to the millionaire businessman about, or banker, of how he's going to be lonely and not have any friends, and that'll make him really sad, and none of this is going to be worth it, and you should just break out your harmonica, and we're going to appeal to the hearts and minds of the 1%, and then they're going to change their mind because it's more fun to be less rich. I mean, this is just...
Well, you see, and that's where this movie is so much weaker than the other Capra films, because in no other Capra film does the Edward Arnold figure reform at the end. He stays just as adamantine as he is at the beginning. He is unmoved by any of this good-natured sharing that he sees, and moves to crush people.
Or the sad specter of his future loneliness.
Yeah, that doesn't bother him at all in Meet John Doe or in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
And this is why, don't you think this is why? Because we'll be talking about Jimmy Stewart and his persona when we come to that retrospective episode. Why Capra himself becomes his characters become increasingly desperate and hysterical.
Sure. Well, they're desperate and
as they recognize that his only method that he can see for social change, that these mechanisms aren't going to work.
Never will they work.
Well, we're not actually talking about this movie, though.
No, but I think it is important to lay that out. It is central to the issues with this movie. Tremendously under-theorized. Also, in terms of race.
Oh, it's horrible. You can see it straining to be very liberal.
Of course.
Within the terms of its time.
Some of it has to do with things that Capra couldn't change. Now, I'm not sure if he would have been allowed to have Eddie Rochester Anderson and Reba, that actress, I don't know her name, she's really good too, as members of the household who aren't servants. I'm not sure you would have been permitted to have that in a film.
Well, he's not a servant. He's on relief, and he's just hanging out.
Yeah.
And actually, no one there is making an income. They're living off of Grandpa's businessman earnings.
But only Reba Lillian Yarbo.
Yeah, she doesn't have a filmography on Wikipedia, though. We'd have to go to IMDb.
Yeah. Now, Eddie Rochester Anderson is a brilliant actor, Jack Benny's comedy partner for decades.
Yeah, he gets some good bits.
Yeah.
Mostly running in and out of the house real fast.
Sure, he's a good physical comedian. But
Forgot the mustard!
Yeah. I got pickled pig feet. This is a problem.
Now, some of the best parts are the insertions, like the scenes between Stuart and Arthur.
Oh, those are awesome.
Are so charged with eroticism and intimacy. Like, they might as well be in a different film. They're certainly in a different world than the play, and that's preparing the way for magnificent scenes with Donna Reed in It's a Wonderful Life.
And also between Stewart and Jean Arthur in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
And also, of course, Bitter Tea of General Yen, a surprisingly erotic film from Capra.
Capra is always erotic.
Of course he is. It happened one night, yeah. I mean, just, you can go on and on.
Yeah, he is a master.
But it always surprises me. He isn't talked about that way.
Well, I talk about him that way.
He is a master of the erotic in film.
And Elise wrote an essay on
we'll talk about that
other master, Jimmy Stewart.
Of the erotic. We'll talk about that when we get to that episode.
Yes. So the film, we have Edward Arnold, one of the great actors of the 30s. What an incredible career this guy had. He was not Hollywood's idea of a leading man.
No.
But he did. He was a leading man in many movies in the 30s. And Capra starts using him as his most powerful antagonist. This is the first movie for Capra, and it gets better after this, because he's even more vicious in Mr. Smith, and Meet John Doe is probably the apex of his menace. So we can look forward to that, at least, if we ever talk about those.
Sure.
The cast of characters here is just chock full of fun people. You've got Lionel Barrymore.
The selling of the house isn't in the play. It's not even in the play.
It isn't?
Not according to the plot summary I read. The whole thing about the taxes is the main plot of the play, which is just written off as a joke in the film version. That's only mentioned once, but that's what comes back and gets him in the final act.
Really? No.
I mean, if someone has read the play and the plot summary I read is incomplete, let us know, but...
No, I have not read the play or seen it.
Of course, that's completely incoherent in the film, too, as many Capra haters have pointed out. Why on earth do we have this big scene about Lionel Barrymore being rescued by his friends, and then he turns around and screws the whole block on a whim to run after his granddaughter?
Well,
this is ridiculous. What is going on in this movie?
Grandpa Vanderhoff really fucks up. He shows himself not to be in the great line of American heroes like John Paul Jones and Lincoln and all the other people he lists.
Lurking in this play somewhere, or maybe being brought out by Riskin, I don't know, is some kind of idea of heroes that he doesn't mention, like Emerson and Thoreau's. Well, some idea of socialism, really, the way you and I like to talk about it, which is people just who don't want a lot materially out of life, but do want to be comfortable and not have to work and be able to pursue anything that their hearts desires, even though they are contributing nothing to society and nothing to culture. They're just having fun.
Yeah. Well, you think that's Riskin? That's Capra. I mean, Capra wrote a thesis on Emerson.
Oh, did he now?
Yeah. Capra was...
So he is, even if he's politically shitty, he's a true Emersonian.
Yeah, and Thoreauvian, obviously.
Emerson was no gross Republican, though.
Well, there were no Republicans.
Well, he was an abolitionist, that's all we know. Emerson
went back and forth on what he thought society owed people and what people owed society.
But in this film, nobody owes anything to society, although exactly how they're going to get along and be supported is completely left open.
Now, Capra is basically a Christian anarchist.
That's what we're going to decide now.
He veers wildly back and forth.
Well, I mean, the anarchy, this is interesting because even this anarchy stuff, like, obviously, the Russian comic actor who...
Misha Auer.
Obviously, he's there in the United States because he has fled the Russian Revolution, because he would have been associated with, if not a member of, the aristocracy. And he even mentions a countess at one point who plays a larger role in the play. But once the fireworks start going off, he starts shouting happily about, yay, the revolution! So there's some kind of depoliticized revolution that Capra wants to achieve in this film.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway.
But you can't really actually have a depoliticized revolution. That's not possible, guys.
No, but you can in a film.
That's true. You can aesthetically.
Like they say, they build insane stockpiles of fireworks and start printing the Red Revolution, watch for the flag, and none of it's all divorced from any sort of meaning.
And again, tell me if I'm wrong, write me if you've read the play, but that does not seem to be what the messages said in the play.
Probably not. That's Dub Taylor and his wife, Ann Miller, who many, many years later will appear in the great Mulholland Drive. Spring Byington. There's no end to the fun actors in this movie. Little Donald Meek, the Mr. Poppins.
Yeah.
I make up things. And H.B. Warner, actually that scene always makes me tear up. That scene with H.B. Warner coming to the boardroom and basically having a heart attack in front of the man who has defeated him. And that guy is incredible, H.B. Warner. It's Mr. Gower from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, somebody's got to commit suicide or equivalent in most Capra films, so
that's what becomes of H.B. Warner. He played Christ in the 20s, so he's always in for a rough ride in films that I see him in anyway. You've got the benevolent judge, played by Harry Davenport, the Night Court judge.
The eccentric benevolent judge.
You're going to see an even larger part with a similar benevolent judge blown up to the level of the U.S. Senate in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where Harry Carey plays the vice president, who also has a bemused look as he tries to gavel occasionally. So this is a Capra trademark. Yeah, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, it's interesting because that film didn't have a Riskin screenplay. It had an actual Marxist writing the screenplay, Sidney Buckman, who got blacklisted. So it'll be interesting to see if that's got a bit of a harder edge. I think it does, but we'll see what you think.
Sure, that'll be very interesting, especially since by that time Bernie Sanders will have been absolutely destroyed in the primaries and everything's going to feel very dark, and we're going to see what we can make of the combination of Jimmy Stewart and Capra and a Marxist.
Yeah, the filibuster, which at the time was only used to stop anti-lynching laws, but Jimmy Stewart is using it for a much nobler cause. So I guess we didn't say that much about the film itself, but that crescendo is exuberant. The Polly Wolly Doodle duet and everyone coming back in the house after Grandpa's gaffe is...
I don't know, but it's just such a goddamn complete mess by that point that I don't know how exuberant I actually find it.
No, it works on me. All of it works good. On me.
My feelings about Capra are that he made a film that is impossibly perfect, which is It's a Wonderful Life. There's nothing I would change about that film. And of course I grew up with it like everybody else. And then later I discovered his early work with Stanwyck, which I like a lot. But everything during his most popular period, I have a lot of ambivalence about.
Well, you're angry at Mr. Deeds because it desexualizes Gary Cooper.
Yeah, despite the fact that Capra's a master of the erotic, not for Gary Cooper.
Not in that movie. It's true. For whatever reason, he doesn't choose to use Gary Cooper that way.
Which is, like, perverse.
Yeah. In Meet John Doe, well, he does have that lengthy dream where he talks about spanking Barbara Stanwyck, but that's not the kind of eroticism you really want.
I think what happens during this period is, in a lot of ways, Capra adopts this Mark Twainian faux innocence that is just a load of garbage. And there is none of that, except concentrated in the figure of Clarence the Angel, where it should be. Like in one character, there's none of that in It's a Wonderful Life. He puts it in its place.
That's true.
I'm formulating a theory in real time.
Someday we will do our Capra episode. But I guess that's probably more than enough on You Can't Take It With You.
Oh my god, and now we still have to talk about Bresson. This is going to go on forever, Dave. What are you going to do?
We'll try to keep it to a few minutes per Bresson film here. Should we go through them one by one?
Well, I mainly want to talk about ladies.
Okay, good.
I'm going to hand over Balthazar and Mouchette to you because I didn't even know what to do with them.
Okay.
So Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne, I've seen it many, many times. It completely held up on this viewing. The thing that I was going to say about it that I stopped myself from saying when we were mentioning it last time was that it's extraordinarily Jamesian again.
Yeah, it is.
It's basically the Madame Murrell and Gilbert Osmond plot from Portrait of a Lady, cut out of the rest of that novel, although it was based on a Diderot story. I haven't read Diderot, but I can't help but believe that Bresson is introducing the Jamesian elements layered on top of this plot, which is, as in Angels of Sin, it's about two women's souls becoming intertwined in a negative way, but in a way that gives you a glimpse of the reality of a spiritual life and the reality of evil, the possibility of evil. That evil is the exertion of one person's control of another person's soul.
Yeah, and it doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of crushing disappointment in the person who begins to take on an evil role. She's not born evil. She becomes that way.
Helene has the capacity, and it's a magnificent use of Maria Casares and a magnificent performance by her because of the kind of person she is, this worldly person that she is. She has the capacity for this evil, but it's prompted, the use of it is prompted by her disappointment in love.
Yeah, she's been horribly injured by this guy.
And the guy is a turd.
He really is.
But everyone's sympathetic, even him.
Sure, of course.
Because he is genuinely in love and he may have total illusions about the woman that he's in love with. Stupid, misogynist illusions. The movie makes that very, very clear. But he is still somehow genuinely in love with her. And what fascinates me about the ending, when I first saw this movie when I was very young, in my early 20s. I was reading a lot of Stanley Cavell, and he was talking a lot about J.L. Austin and performatives, how to do things with words, trying to formulate a philosophical theory of language, talking about how some words are not used to communicate, but in themselves actions. And so that made me think about, well, one of his examples is marriage vows. It made me think about the parallel between the marriage vows at the end of this movie and the nuns' vows at the end of Angels of Sin, and how in both cases these words are spoken just as a ritual, just as a formality, and yet they perform an action of binding two souls together.
Yeah, like a spell.
Sure.
Now, didn't it also feel like the Lady Eve?
Oh, yes, no, I've thought that for ages. That they are basically the same plot.
Yeah, except that she doesn't take on the role herself of the...
In Ladies of the Bois de Boulogne.
Yeah, of the person that embarrasses the cad, turns this poor dancer that she knows about into a tool for her revenge.
Yeah.
Like an unwitting tool who doesn't know.
Although she knows something is up the whole time.
But she has no idea exactly what the game plan is. When she finds out, it is pretty dispiriting. This guy, I guess, like Henry Fonda, somehow his numbskullery somehow manages to be so dumb that it comes around again to giving her a reason to live.
To innocence, yeah.
Because there is a resurrection at the end of this movie, which is quite shocking.
But it's very ambiguous as to whether she will last a moment longer than the final image.
Yeah, but she's happy.
That's true.
And this is very important in Bresson. We've seen a bunch of movies now where people go out with one moment of illumination. They're in jail, or they're dying and realizing all is grace. Whatever happens to her, it's all been worth it, presumably.
Yeah, I suppose so. The ending is all about how because she too is in love and has been lifted as he has beyond herself by love, how she in every way submits herself to his will and his judgment.
It's also got some echoes of Waterloo Bridge, except that he's not nearly so accepting of the things he finds out until right at the end.
Well, until she is dead, to all intents and purposes. It is almost Dreyer-esque at the end. That's Ladies.
A lot more to be said about that, obviously, but we're just doing some quick hits here.
So Balthazar and Mouchette, in addition to having a great deal in common with each other, also have a great deal in common with Diary of a Country Priest.
But also Pickpocket.
Well, we'll talk about Pickpocket at the end. But those two, for me, they were Diary of a Country Priest with all grace removed from it, and I didn't know how to handle that at all. So you talk about that.
Well, there is grace shot through the film.
Where? How? Where?
The children playing with the donkey at the beginning.
Yeah,
like,
at
those
the beginning.
Scenes are really magnificent.
And never again.
No, but they're still there. They linger with you. Now, she, unfortunately, loses touch with them. She actually says that. What's his name? Jacques, that still loves her.
Oh, right.
Who wants to marry her. And she tells him, for you, all of that is still present. For me, it's all gone. I've lost complete touch with all of that. Because she's been brutalized.
She's voluntarily been brutalized, so why does she fall in love with this sadist?
Well, I don't know.
Exactly. There is no psychology in these films at all. Not that I necessarily want psychology, but that also makes me not know how to process. This is a common reaction to these films, although most people will just go ahead and say, but it's a great, magnificent work of art anyway, and I'm just frankly admitting that I don't know how to react.
But she just becomes fixated on the really wrong guy.
But what do I make of that as a viewer? What does that matter to me?
And she's also basically been left to her own devices. She doesn't have this childhood playmate. You know, she doesn't have the donkey either for the best part of the life between those childhood scenes and her teenage appearance.
We don't know why she falls in love with him, and we don't know why he is evil.
Well, he is a demonic figure. If I ever run into that guy, I will attack him on sight if he's still alive. I guess it's a brilliant performance. He is so hateful. It's unbelievable.
Now, of course, the donkey famously is Bresson's ideal actor, in that he is completely impassive and being, not seeming at all.
Completely beautiful.
And then Mouchette plays the role of the donkey in her film, except that she herself is demonically possessed.
What a great performance by that kid.
Which, of course, is more heartening than watching anything that happens in O HASARD, BALTHAZAR, just her violent resistance to the disgusting world around her.
Where she sings on key to the guy that has the epileptic attack.
Sure, and then he rapes her.
Yeah, I know.
What are these films? What is happening? What is this vision?
It's a very obviously tragic, dark vision, but it is not misanthropic, I don't think.
I don't know how you make that distinction.
Because the feelings that shine out of that kid as she tries to revive this guy are incredible.
The good feelings are rewarded with sadism.
Yeah, I know. Doesn't that feel biblical? All we have are these intermittent fine feelings that glue us together briefly. Obviously not a fun movie to watch. It's very hard to watch, but
that one in particular feels like poverty porn.
I found it incredible. I don't know what I've been doing not seeing all these other movies. I had seen BALTHAZAR before.
And after the trial of making your way through Mouchette and the human and physical ugliness of the whole thing, it's such a relief at the end. Like, the only intimations of grace in BALTHAZAR, as you say, there are two. There's the one at the beginning with the donkey, and then we also end with the donkey's death. And Mouchette also gets a beautiful death of sorts. It's just almost like just the physical beauty is the only intimation of grace anywhere in the film other than that scene where she sings and then is raped.
Hard to watch.
Like, the minute you see the pool of water, it's such a relief. Like, I felt physical relief that finally there was a beautiful image in the movie.
Escape.
There was an image of beauty in the movie, and it was so relieving, but at the same time, I knew exactly what was going to happen.
It is rough, but immensely rewarding.
Well, you are on the side of critical opinion, but I'm just being honest. I don't know how to process those two films at all.
What about the scenes with the bumper cars? That was incredible. It's a disturbing scene as well. She's maybe getting picked up by this adult.
Was that supposed to be an adult? I thought that was someone barely older than her.
He's definitely like in his 20s, that guy.
Well, he didn't seem much older than her.
Okay, well.
Again, I assumed that if they did make a connection, she would just get raped in BALTHAZAR. And what possible other interest could he take in this poor, dirty, club-footed girl? And he's already shown that he is sadistic toward her.
But she's so exhilarated by it. It's really...
I don't know. That makes it worse to me.
I know. Painful.
Yeah. Okay, what do you want to say about Pickpocket?
Well, Pickpocket is usually cited as the first part of the 3-part Human Condition trilogy. Critics have said it's Pickpocket, BALTHAZAR, and Mouchette are the trilogy. Informal.
I don't see the trilogy. I see the two films being related, although they seem more related to the suffering figure of the country priest, although in that film at least there's some indication that first of all, that he has a work to do, and secondly, that he might even be a little bit effective at it.
Right. Well, Pickpocket, he's sort of effective at his chosen profession.
Like his vocation?
Yeah, occasionally. You know, it's based on Dostoevsky.
Which Dostoevsky?
I think Crime and Punishment? Because you've got the Superman idea.
Yeah, but it's stupid, and it's actually acknowledged to be stupid.
Exactly.
In the film. What on earth good are you producing for the world by becoming a thief? Personally, I don't think this person is doing a whole lot of evil in this world by becoming a pickpocket. Not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but they're also certainly not producing any good. So the whole thing is a study of nihilistic alienation.
Yeah, although, of course, the ending puts all of that aside.
And then Bresson just gives up on that in the rest of the Human Condition trilogy of anybody coming together with anybody.
This is the kind of thing...
I don't disagree. See, what I mean by not being able to process it, obviously it's not a vision of humanity with which I disagree. I'm just not sure what it's doing for me.
One day we'll come back, we'll do a real episode on Bresson, and we'll talk through the movies in much more detail.
Yeah, I want to see them again. This is the first time I've seen either Mouchette or O HASARD, BALTHAZAR.
This is very, very much a little rough sketch of things that we might say in the future.
What he deliberately does in those two films is first remove all hope and also remove all catharsis. That's what the point is of taking out the conventional acting style. His characters have emotions. Like, Mouchette spends most of the film with tears pouring down her face. Impassive face.
I don't know, you can't call that child a non-actor. She's brilliant.
But in contrast to something like Waterloo Bridge, there's deliberately no catharsis. It's like an act of aggression against the viewer as well as the characters.
Yeah, it is. Undoubtedly.
And again, what is that doing for me? I don't know. I have to think about it and feel it some more.
And we'll return to these.
Sure. Right now, I'm just hurting.
And they also, very clearly now, we can see what they may have held for Shanalik. So we'll be talking about them in the background of our Angela Shanalik series.
The anti-catharsis, yes, but I don't know about the relentless cruelty.
Not so much the cruelty, but the use of synecdochal camera, which she talked about in person when we saw her speak, shooting parts of the body.
Oh yeah, but she does it completely differently.
Of course. I'm not saying
it shouldn't even be discussed with Bresson unless he develops...
But she's discussed it as...
Yeah, but she's doing something utterly different, and unless he starts doing this later, we haven't come to the end of his filmography yet in this series. When he is shooting hands and feet, they're always doing something. It's always part of the action, and it's very deliberately not when Shanalik is doing it.
Yeah, that's true. It's just as much how you take something and transform it to express your own worldview. That's what creative misprision is all about, right?
So what are we doing next time?
Angela Shanalik.
Well, fancy that.
So we'll be talking about the entire retrospective that we saw on Angela Shanalik. But particularly, we're going to rewatch a couple of movies. We haven't quite decided which ones yet, so you'll have to stay tuned for that. We'll be keying in on a couple of texts and then referring to the others as background.
We will.
And I think we'll have a lot to say. I was really blown away
we do have a lot to say.
So we'll see you soon, folks.
Bye-bye.